Mateusz Pawlak, dział gospodarczy Rzeczpospolitej. Jesteśmy w trakcie It's Time konferencji poświęconej tematyce nieruchomości komercyjnych. Konferencji zorganizowanej przez CBRE. Jest ze mną pan Sean Doyle, Head of Investment Property w CBRE na Europę Centralną. Thank you, Sean, for joining me here. I would like to start I would like to ask you for a view on the Polish market, but from the outside perspective. So, what's the perspective of the Polish market, Polish commercial real estate market, but on a global background?
Sure. Well, I think over the last number of years, Poland has really sort of risen on the agenda for international investors right across the spectrum, from Asia, Europe, the US, and I think that's very evident in the fact that around 95 to 98% of all investments in commercial property in Poland are done by international capital. So we're very, what's unique about Poland, actually, it's a very small percentage of the investment is Polish capital. So I think, and one of the reasons that, and it's been growing significantly in recent years as well. We saw 7.7 billion euros worth of commercial property traded last year, which was a record. And I think that was due to the very, very strong occupational fundamentals.
The record beaten from the last year.
From last year, so almost every year on year has been a record. And but what is underpinning all of that is the fact that it has very, very strong occupational markets. Poland is one of the standout performers in terms of net absorption of new office space, net absorption of logistics and industrial space. And even, when we talk about the retail investment market, retailers are still performing well here. We haven't seen the level of bankruptcies or tenants struggling in this market as we have in some of the Western markets. So ultimately, it's the fundamentals which are really underpinning the investment attractiveness of Poland.
Okay, so it seems it used to be very attractive for investors, but the trend is going to continue in the future?
I think it's only going to continue. At the moment, we can't see in the immediate horizon anything that should slow it down. We anticipate continued strong demand of occupiers. So with the strong demand of occupiers comes things like rental growth and falling vacancy. So when you have these dynamics in the market, which we have at present across sectors, that encourages investors, global investors, that investing into Poland is a secure investment. But there are potentially problems on the horizon. We have a falling birth rate. We have in Poland, labor shortages in some of the key markets across the country. And if employers don't see the availability of labor there, that becomes an issue, and they can't make those moves into those markets, which increases the net absorption.
What about the economy that is slowing down, not only in Poland, but globally?
Globally, it's slowing down, but I think we saw in the presentation earlier today, it is slowing down, but Poland is still ahead of the curve. It's still, higher GDP per capita, higher consumer spending. So I think there's a number of positive indicators which are really sort of bolstering the Polish market relative to other markets across Europe.
And interest rates.
I think
if they change, what happens?
If they change, obviously everything will change. But if they go up, but we're skeptical that interest rates are going to change. Obviously, across Europe, we're in negative interest rate territory. We heard there today that the US may, in the not too distant future, enter negative interest rate territory. So I think we're not so concerned about that. But obviously, should it happen, it would have an impact.
I just came from Davos last week, and a main theme of Davos was environmentalism and responsible business. So I would like to ask you, is it also kind of a main issue in the business of commercial real estate?
It is growing in importance. I think, obviously, in given the choice, some investors, developers might not focus on it, because implementing sort of sustainable technologies, etc., going for green certification. These things cost money and ultimately hit the bottom line. But ultimately, through legislation, it has built through investor demands. It's become more important to the developers. So a lot of the global investment funds now have brought in policies that they will only invest in green, sort of BREEAM excellent buildings or LEED platinum or buildings. So when these
kind of a pressure for
it's pressure initially from the investors, who in turn, because they're international investors, are getting it from their legislation in their own country. So ultimately, I think it is the need, and in order to accelerate this, there will need to be legislation here in Poland as well that sort of encourages developers and investors to sort of invest in sustainable technologies and sort of promote sustainable buildings.
Okay, for the end, I would like to go back to the Polish market. So, what kind of buildings, what kind of investments are the most interesting for the investors from the global market?
Sure, we ran a survey here today, and I think from the respondents we had over 400 people in the audience, and office investment from an international investment standpoint stood out at nearly sort of 35 to 40% of the vote, and this is what we see across Europe. I think growing in importance is industrial and logistics. We've heard or we see the impact of things like e-commerce and how it will be the future, and ultimately investments into this segment, if the logistics or manufacturing is located well, it can only be it will only do well and grow in terms of rent in the future. But I think probably what we see year on year is that residential, student housing, senior housing, alternative investments we call it, or these are the real growth sectors in the Polish market, we believe, in the coming years. Obviously, we are way behind the curve. I think 1.5% of investment volume in Poland was alternative investments by the investment funds. But that is a segment of the market we predict that in the coming 5 to 10 years will grow year on year.
Szanowni Państwo, moim i Państwa gościem był pan Sean Doyle, Head of Investment Property w CBRE Central Europe. Dziękuję bardzo.